From the story, the Marines mocked her scars until the general saw them and froze. Elena Rivera stood at the gate of the Marine training base with a small bag on her back and big dreams in her heart. The sun was hot, the wind dry, and the air full of shouts and orders. She looked calm, but inside, her heart was racing like a storm. This was her first day, and everything was about to change as she walked inside. Other recruits turned their heads. Some stared at her face, others at her neck and arms. They saw the scars, burn marks, old and deep, running along her skin like broken rivers. No one asked about them, but their eyes said enough. Whispers followed her like shadows. "Did you see her arms?" One boy muttered. "She looks like she came out of a war already." Another joked. Elena heard them all but said nothing. She kept walking. Her eyes straight, her steps firm. Inside the barracks, she picked a corner bed and unpacked silently. The other girls were loud, laughing, chatting, making fun. One of them, a tall girl with curly hair named Jenna, pointed at Elena when she thought she wasn't looking. "She's creepy," Jenna whispered to her friend. "She never smiles." Elena heard it, but still stayed silent. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to prove something to herself, and maybe to the world. Training started early next morning. Push-ups, sit-ups, running, shouting, mud, sweat. It was brutal. Elena didn't complain once. She didn't speak unless spoken to, while others slowed down or grumbled. She kept moving. One of the drill sergeants, a tough woman named Sergeant Brooks, noticed her. "Elena," she shouted during obstacle training. "Where did you learn to climb like that?" Elena simply replied, "At home, ma'am," but still the jokes didn't stop. The scars made people uncomfortable. The boys in the unit called her patchwork behind her back. They laughed when she changed clothes one night. A recruit named Mason dropped a fake lizard on her bed and laughed when she didn't react. "She doesn't even feel anything. Maybe her skin's dead," he said. Some laughed, others stayed quiet, unsure. Elena picked up the lizard, placed it on the table, and went back to folding her shirt. No anger, no tears, just silence. But not all silence means weakness. Elena remembered the fire every night when she closed her eyes. The smoke, the heat, the screaming. She had run back into a burning house to save her little cousin and the neighbor's child. Her skin had melted, her lungs had almost collapsed. She was only 16 then, 3 years later. She stood in a Marine camp, not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted to protect people. Again, she had already been through war. Her own kind. One evening, while cleaning her boots, a younger girl named Riley sat beside her. Riley had been scared of her at first, but today she looked curious. "Do they hurt?" she asked, pointing to the scars. Elena looked at her calmly. "No," she said, "not anymore." "Did it happen in an accident?" Riley asked softly. Elena nodded. "A fire." That was all she said. But something in Riley's eyes changed. Respect? Maybe even awe. Later that night, Riley told the others. She saved 2 kids from a burning house. Some didn't believe her, but others went quiet thinking about it. The jokes didn't stop completely, but they were less loud now. Still, no one knew the full truth, and Elena didn't tell it. She let her actions speak. In every drill, every race, every push-up, she gave everything, more than anyone else. Because her battle had started long before the Marines. And it wasn't over yet, but one thing was clear. Even with the scars, even with the silence, Elena Rivera was not weak. She was steel hidden in soft skin. Fire that had burned but didn't destroy. She was becoming a Marine, and soon even the ones who mocked her would know it. Elena didn't sleep much that night. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. Outside, the night wind blew gently, but her mind was noisy. Not with fear, but with memory. 3 years ago, she had stood in front of her burning house. Flames were eating the roof, windows, and doors. Smoke poured out like a monster. People were screaming, but no one was going in. Inside, her baby cousin and the neighbor's daughter were trapped. Everyone else had run out, but Elena had run in. She didn't think about safety. She only knew that 2 small children were crying behind that black wall of heat. She wrapped a wet cloth around her mouth and charged into the fire. The smoke stung her eyes. Her skin felt like it was melting. But she found the kids. She carried them both out, wrapped in her arms like treasure, and then she collapsed. The doctor said she almost died. Her lungs were full of smoke, and her skin had 2nd and 3rd degree burns. She was in the hospital for months. She couldn't eat by herself or even walk without help. But she never cried, not once. Everyone called her a hero. Newspapers wrote about her. But Elena didn't feel like a hero, she just felt alive. And that meant she had another chance to do something that mattered. So she decided to become a Marine, not to wear medals or get attention, but because saving people felt right. It made the pain worth something. She had already faced death once. No training could scare her after that. Back at the Marine camp, her scars were still a mystery to most. The recruits didn't know the fire story. They only saw the surface, the marks on her neck, the tough skin on her arms. They judged her from the outside. They didn't understand what she had already survived. One afternoon, during a long-distance run in full gear, Elena was falling behind, not because she was weak, but because the sun made her skin itch and burn under the armor. She didn't complain, she pushed forward step by step. Sweat dripped into the edges of her old wounds. She clenched her fists and kept going. Ahead of her, 2 recruits laughed and looked back. Maybe her scars are slowing her down, one joked. She should have joined the kitchen team, said the other. Elena heard them. But instead of getting angry, she smiled a little because she knew something they didn't. She had already outrun death when she reached the finish line. Her legs were shaking, her face was pale, but she didn't fall. She looked straight ahead, breathing deep. One of the drill sergeants watched her quietly and made a small note in his book. That evening, during cleanup duty, one recruit named Carter approached her. He had seen her that day in the run. "You okay?" he asked a little awkwardly. "I'm fine," she replied, wiping her hands on her pants. Then he hesitated. "Those scars, are they from something real?" Elena looked at him calm and clear. "Yes," she said. "Very real." She didn't say more. She didn't need to. Carter didn't laugh like the others. He just nodded and walked away, thoughtful, little by little. The story began to leak out, not from Elena, but from someone who recognized her from a newspaper photo. A junior staff member saw her during a drill and whispered, "I think she's the girl from the fire." The rumor spread. But this time it came with respect. Some recruits searched online and found the article. They saw the photo. Elena, younger, burned, holding 2 crying children in a blanket. One headline read, "Brave teen risks life to save kids from blaze." Suddenly the mood began to change. Those who laughed now looked away when she passed. Those who judged her started to feel small. But Elena didn't act proud. She didn't change her walk or lift her chin higher. She stayed the same, quiet, strong, focused. Because she didn't come to be admired, she came to become something greater. And she knew. Real strength wasn't loud, it didn't need attention. Real strength had already walked through fire and come out stronger. Elena Rivera wasn't here to prove them wrong. She was here to prove herself right. And no matter how slow she ran or how silent she stayed, she was becoming the kind of Marine no one could ignore forever. The sun was blazing hot over the training field. Dust rose with every step the recruits took. Sweat rolled down their faces and soaked their shirts. Elena stood at the edge of the field, her fists clenched, her eyes steady. Today was the hand-to-hand combat test. Each recruit had to face an opponent. No excuses, no mercy, just grit and strength. When the instructor called Elena's name, the group went silent. Her opponent was Corporal Mason. He wasn't just a recruit. He had already been in the program for 6 months. Taller, stronger, louder, he loved being the center of attention. And today, he smirked as he stepped forward. "Well, well," Mason said loudly. "Looks like I'm fighting the patchwork doll." A few people laughed. Elena said nothing. The instructor's whistle blew. Mason charged forward full of confidence. He thought it would be easy. But the moment he swung, Elena ducked, rolled, and came up behind him. She didn't hit hard, but she was fast. Controlled and patient, Mason laughed. "You're gonna have to do better than that." He rushed her again, this time catching her shoulder. She stumbled back but kept her balance. She didn't show pain. Even though her old burn scars stung when she landed, she pushed through. She always pushed through. They circled each other, the others watched, waiting for Mason to end it. But minutes passed, and Elena was still standing, still moving, still breathing hard. And Mason was starting to look tired. "Why don't you just give up?" he barked. Elena didn't reply. Instead, she waited, then moved in with a clean sweep of his legs. Mason hit the ground with a heavy thud. Dust flew up around them. The crowd gasped. No one expected that. He scrambled back to his feet. His pride bruised, fury burned in his eyes. He charged again, fists swinging wild. Elena blocked the first punch, dodged the second, and stepped aside. Mason fell forward, losing balance. She could have taken advantage, but she didn't. She just stood still, letting him make a fool of himself. The whistle blew. "Match over," barked the instructor. "Both fighters, fall out." Elena turned and walked off the field without looking back. She didn't care who was watching, but everyone was. Mason stood in place, panting, humiliated. He had underestimated her. He had mocked her scars, and now he had lost. Not by knockout, but by being outlasted, outsmarted, outclassed. That night in the barracks, the mood was different. People still talked, but now the jokes were softer. Riley looked at Elena with wide eyes. "You didn't even hit him hard," she whispered. Elena shrugged. "I didn't need to," she replied. But not everyone was impressed. Mason's pride was too wounded in the dining hall. He slammed his tray down beside her. "You think you're tough?" he snapped. "You think you're better than me because you took a fall in a house fire?" The room fell silent. Elena looked up at him slowly. "No," she said calmly. "I don't think I'm better than anyone." She stood up, her voice still low but strong. "I just think you don't know what real pain feels like." Then she picked up her tray and walked away. No shouting, no fighting back, but her words stayed in the air like smoke. Everyone felt it, especially Mason. Later that week, during an early morning run, Mason fell behind. Elena saw him limping slightly. She could have ignored him. She could have passed him and finished first. But she didn't. She slowed down, ran beside him. Not a word was spoken, but the silence said everything. From that day, Mason stopped mocking her. He didn't say sorry, but he didn't need to. His silence was apology enough, and Elena didn't need loud respect. She only needed space to prove herself. The instructors started to notice. Her focus, her discipline, her heart, one of them. Sergeant Brooks called her aside. "You don't talk much, Rivera," she said. "But you fight like someone who's already seen hell." Elena just nodded. "I have, ma'am," and slowly, without needing to change who she was, Elena began earning what no mocking could steal. Respect. Not just because she survived, but because she didn't let pain make her bitter. She let it make her better, and in the next few days, her name would reach someone very high, someone who already knew who she was. And when that person arrived, everything in this camp would shift forever. It was a quiet morning, the kind of morning where everyone moved slowly, sore from training. The sky was gray. The wind was cool inside the admin office at base. Papers were stacked in messy piles. Coffee cups sat next to old reports. But one folder, thicker than the rest, sat neatly in the center of the desk. It was marked confidential, bright red letters, stamped bold. It had one name on the tab, Private Elena Rivera. Sergeant Brooks walked in, holding her usual mug of black coffee. She had a headache from yelling at recruits the day before. She sat down, picked up the file casually, and flipped it open. She expected the usual, birth date, medical history, education. But by the third page, she stopped reading and sat up straight. Her eyes scanned the lines again, this time slowly, then again even slower. The file didn't just have medical reports. It had news clippings, photos from newspapers, handwritten letters from families, even a child's drawing with the words, "Thank you for saving my sister," in crayon. It also included a personal letter from General Marcus Harrow, the highest-ranking officer in the region, a man known for never wasting words. And at the bottom of the letter, in bold pen, he had written, "This girl is not a regular recruit. Watch her closely. She's already proven more courage than many soldiers do in war." Sergeant Brooks sat still for a long moment. The quiet hum of the air conditioner was the only sound in the room. She read the story again, the house fire, the rescue, the recovery. It hit differently now. Now the scars made sense, now the silence made sense. Now Elena Rivera wasn't just a quiet girl with burns. She was a warrior who had already faced death and walked out with 2 children in her arms. Brooks closed the file, stood up, and looked out the window. She saw Elena across the field, jogging alone, focused, calm, steady, unbothered by the dust or the sweat, and for the first time, Brooks didn't just see a recruit. She saw someone with fire inside. Not just on the skin. Later that afternoon, Sergeant Brooks walked into the commander's office. She placed the file on his desk. "You should see this," she said simply. The commander raised an eyebrow. He opened the folder, flipped through it quickly, then stopped at the general's letter. "General Harrow wrote this?" he asked. Brooks nodded. "Yes, sir. And he's visiting this base tomorrow." The commander leaned back in his chair, thinking, "I didn't know we had someone like her." "Neither did I," Brooks admitted. "But we do." That night, the news quietly spread among the officers. Not the full story, but enough they didn't share it with the recruits. They didn't want gossip or drama, but behind closed doors, the tone around Elena Rivera shifted. No one told her anything. She woke up the next day like any other, tied her boots, folded her sheets, ate her breakfast in silence. Outside, the training field buzzed with normal energy, but something felt different. The air felt heavier, more alert. Then came the announcement. "All recruits report to formation." Now, they lined up quickly, boots on gravel, hands behind backs. Elena stood in the second row, same as always. Still unnoticed, still silent, and then he arrived. A black car rolled into the base, the door opened, and General Marcus Harrow stepped out, tall, sharp, and serious. The man who led thousands of Marines across multiple regions. He walked past the rows slowly, inspecting each recruit. When he reached Elena, he stopped, dead still. For a few seconds, no one breathed. He looked at her face, then at the scars on her neck and arms, and his expression softened, not with pity, but with recognition. He stepped back, stood at attention, and saluted her. Gasps echoed through the line. No one had ever seen a general salute a recruit. "Not like that, Elena Rivera," he said clearly. "You carry more honor in those scars than many carry in medals." Elena's eyes widened, but she said nothing. She simply nodded, standing tall. The general turned to the other recruits. "You mocked what you didn't understand," he said sharply. "You laughed at pain, and you missed the courage behind it." He faced Elena again. "Carry on, Private Rivera." And then he walked on. The silence behind him was thick, not with shame, but with realization. The girl they had called Patchwork had just been recognized by the highest authority in the room. And not for her looks, but for her truth. From that moment on, everything began to change. The sun had not yet risen when the base came alive with noise. Boots hit the floor, lockers slammed, voices shouted orders. But today, there was something different in the air, something tense, something electric. The recruits had been told to wear their cleanest uniforms. No dirt, no wrinkles, no excuses. Even the toughest drill instructors looked sharper than usual. Because General Marcus Harrow was arriving today, and when a general visits, no one acts normal. Elena tied her boots tight, her fingers steady. She didn't know what the fuss was about. No one had told her. She just followed the routine. Breakfast, clean up, line up. The same silence. The same whispers, only this time the whispers didn't sting. They were full of confusion and curiosity. "Why's the general coming here?" one recruit asked. "Inspection, maybe." Another guessed. "No," someone said quietly. "I heard it's about one of us." Elena heard them but didn't react. She had no idea she was the reason, not yet. At exactly 800 hours, the black government vehicle arrived. It drove slowly across the gravel. Every recruit stood straight. Shoulders locked, faces forward. The car door opened. Out stepped General Marcus Harrow, dressed in sharp green uniform. Rows of medals on his chest, his face was unreadable. Carved in stone, he didn't smile. Didn't wave, he just walked. Behind him was his assistant, carrying a clipboard and a camera. They walked past the first row of recruits. Inspecting, watching. The silence was loud. No one dared blink too fast. Then the general stopped right in front of Elena. Everyone noticed it. He didn't stop for anyone else. But now he stood still, staring at her. His eyes moved slowly from her face to her neck, to the burn scars on her arms, partially visible even under uniform. And for the first time his expression changed. Not to disgust, not to pity, but to something soft, something personal. Then he did something that shook the whole base. He saluted her. Gasps broke out quietly. Officers exchanged glances. Even Sergeant Brooks raised an eyebrow. No one knew what was happening except a few. And Elena, she stood frozen. The general dropped his hand and spoke. "Private Elena Rivera," he said in a low, steady voice. "You saved 2 lives before you ever wore this uniform. You faced death without training, without backup, and without fear. Most people only talk about courage," he said. "You've already lived it." Elena's lips parted slightly. She didn't know what to say. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum. but her face stayed calm. She nodded. "Thank you." "Sir," she said softly. The general stepped closer. He looked directly at the other recruits now. "Some of you mocked her scars," he said coldly. "Some of you judged what you didn't understand. And that is your weakness, not hers." A long silence followed. No one dared move. Even Mason, standing in the back row, looked down at the ground. The general turned again to Elena. "In all my years," he said, "I've seen bravery on the battlefield. But bravery in the middle of fire alone as a civilian? That is rare." He handed something to his assistant, then looked back at her. "I will see you again soon. Private Rivera," he said. Then he walked away. No further words. No ceremony, just truth and power and silence. As the general's car rolled away, the energy on base had completely shifted. Recruits who once avoided Elena now looked at her with wide eyes, not out of fear but out of respect, the kind that couldn't be faked, the kind that had to be earned that evening during free time. No one mocked her, no jokes, no whispers. Even Jenna, who once called her creepy, walked past and gave her a small nod. A quiet peace settled around Elena, not because people changed suddenly, but because they now saw what she never had to explain. Her scars were not ugly, they were proof. Proof that she had faced fire and won. Proof that pain could build a soldier before the uniform ever did. Elena sat alone that night. Watching the sun go down, she didn't smile. But her heart felt lighter. The world had finally seen her, not just her scars, but her story, and in the next few days that story would go far beyond the camp. It would reach places she never imagined. But for now she just sat still, calm, quiet, and powerful, like the fire inside her had never died, only grown stronger. After the general left, the training field felt different. Not because anything looked different, but because the way people looked at Elena had changed. The same eyes that once stared with judgment now turned away in shame. The same mouths that once whispered insults now stayed shut, not because they were afraid, but because they finally understood what she carried. The silence around her wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't filled with mocking or discomfort. Now it was filled with respect. For the next few days no one made fun of her scars. No one called her names. Some recruits even walked up to her, not to joke or tease, but to offer small nods. Simple words, quiet respect. "Hey," said Carter during break. "I saw that article." He looked nervous. "You're kind of amazing." Elena gave a small smile. "Thanks," she said. Nothing more. She didn't need big speeches. She had never wanted attention, just a place to belong. Later that night, Riley found her in the hallway. She had tears in her eyes. "I didn't know you went through all that," she said softly. Elena put a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," she replied. "I don't carry it for people to feel sorry. I carry it so I never forget what strength means." In the mess hall, even Mason, the loudest of her critics, stayed quiet. He watched her from a distance. And when she passed, he gave a nod, not forced. Not fake, just honest, and that was enough. The shift was slow, but it was real. One day, Sergeant Brooks called Elena forward during weapons training. "I want you to lead today's drill," she said. Elena blinked, surprised. "Me?" "You've earned it," the sergeant replied. And that was all it took. Elena stepped forward, explained the handling techniques. She spoke with confidence, soft but sure. Her hands moved with ease, her voice clear. The recruits listened, really listened, even those who used to ignore her instructions in group work. Now they followed her lead. That night, someone posted a photo on the camp board, a printed newspaper clipping from her rescue story underneath it. Someone had written in pen, "Real hero, before the uniform." No one claimed credit for writing it, but almost everyone stopped to read it. And no one dared tear it down. Elena saw it too. She didn't say anything, but deep inside, she felt something soften. A wall that had stood tall for years slowly began to lower. Her story began to inspire not just respect, but change. Recruits who once kept to themselves started talking about their own fears, about pain, about survival. One girl admitted to having lost her brother in a car crash. Another talked about growing up in foster care. Elena had opened a door, and others were walking through it. Pain wasn't shameful anymore. It became a quiet badge, one that didn't need to be worn loudly, but one that everyone carried in some way. One morning, while running laps, Mason ran beside her. He didn't speak at first, they just ran side by side. Silent, after a while, he said, "You know, When I made fun of you, it wasn't about you." Elena didn't stop, she just nodded. "I know," she said. He looked surprised. "You do?" She turned to him. "People laugh at things they don't understand. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's pain." Mason didn't reply, but he didn't fall behind either. From that day on, he always trained near her, not to compete but to learn. The officers noticed the change too. They started giving her more responsibility, letting her lead warm-ups, run drills, give feedback, and each time, Elena handled it with quiet strength. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, but she was solid, like stone that had survived fire and didn't crumble. Even the younger recruits started to look up to her one evening. A boy who had just arrived sat beside her at dinner. "I heard about the fire," he whispered. "I'm scared to be here." Elena looked at him gently. "It's okay to be scared," she said. "Courage isn't being fearless. It's moving forward even when you are." And in that moment, the boy smiled because someone finally understood. Elena didn't need a title to be a leader. She had already become one. Not because of medals, not because of rank, but because she lived the lesson everyone else was still learning. And though the general had gone, his words still echoed in the minds of everyone at that base. She carries more honor in those scars than many carry in medals. And now the whole camp believed it too. The sky was painted gold and pink as the sun began to rise over the base. A soft wind blew across the training field, carrying dust and whispers. But today, no one was joking, no one was slacking. Everyone stood tall, uniform sharp, boots clean, because today was ceremony day. Once a month, the base held a recognition ceremony. It was where medals were awarded, names were called, and hands were shaken. Usually, only the top performers, or those with perfect scores, were chosen. So when the list went up on the board, everyone gathered around it like bees on honey. "Elena's name's not on it," someone said, scanning the sheet. "She's not getting anything?" "She deserves it more than half of them," another muttered. But Elena didn't look at the list. She never did. She sat quietly in the corner of the yard, polishing her boots, not expecting anything, not waiting for approval. Sergeant Brooks walked past her, paused, and looked down. "Nice shine, Rivera." "Thank you, ma'am," Elena replied. Not looking up, Brooks gave a small smile. "You might want to keep them extra clean today," she said, then walked off, leaving Elena slightly confused. At noon, the entire company gathered on the field. Chairs were lined up neatly in rows. An American flag waved behind a small wooden stage. The commander stood at the podium reading from a folder. Names were called, and recruits stepped forward proudly. Some got ribbons, others small medals for fitness or teamwork. The air was warm, the sun bright, but Elena stood in the back row, hands folded behind her back. She clapped for every name, every speech, even when her name wasn't mentioned. She clapped, then the commander cleared his throat. "We have one final recognition today," he said. This one was not listed on the board. Everyone fell silent, eyes turned toward the stage. The commander smiled, then looked out over the crowd. "This is not a medal for battlefield service," he continued. "This is not for a perfect score or for speed. This is for something deeper." He picked up a small blue box and opened it. Inside was a silver medal, shining bright even under the afternoon sun. Then he looked straight at Elena. "Private Elena Rivera," he called out. "Please step forward." Elena's heart skipped a beat. She froze for a moment, unsure. Then slowly she walked through the rows. Everyone moved aside. All eyes were on her. Not with judgment, but with something heavier. Respect. When she reached the stage, the commander stepped back. And to everyone's surprise, General Marcus Harrow appeared again. No one had seen him arrive. But there he was, in full uniform, walking slowly toward Elena with the box in his hands. He stood in front of her, face calm, voice steady. "This medal," he said, "is not given for war. It is given for courage in its purest form. For a civilian who ran into fire, not for glory, but for life." He turned to the crowd. While most people ran away, she ran toward the flames. She saved not one but 2 lives, and when asked why, she simply said, "It was the right thing to do." A quiet hush fell over the field. Even the birds seemed to pause. Elena stood still, not blinking. Then the general pinned the medal to her chest. It sparkled against her uniform like a star born from ash. "You are a soldier not because of this uniform," he said softly, "but because of the fire that didn't destroy you. It built you." Elena finally looked him in the eye. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice steady. The general saluted her once again. She returned the salute, not as a recruit, but as someone who had earned her place. The crowd erupted in applause, not loud or wild, but long, steady, and real. Even Mason stood clapping slowly, eyes focused. Riley wiped a tear from her cheek, and Sergeant Brooks smiled quietly from the side, arms crossed, as Elena walked back to her place. She carried, not just the medal, but a new kind of weight. A weight made of trust, respect, and quiet pride. Later that evening, the medal was placed inside her locker, but the moment stayed in the hearts of everyone who saw it. Not just because of the medal, but because it reminded them of something important. That real heroes don't always wear capes or carry guns. Sometimes they just wear scars. Elena sat on her bed that night, staring at the medal, not smiling, not crying, just remembering. The fire, the fear, the heat. And the moment she chose to go back inside that burning house, she didn't do it to be remembered. She did it because someone needed her. And now, the world had remembered anyway. The sun rose slowly over the Marine base the next morning. Birds flew across the sky, quiet and calm. It was just another training day on paper. But for Elena Rivera, everything had changed. She woke up early like always, made her bed with perfect corners, tied her boots tight, her fingers steady and sure. But something felt different. Not in the world. In her. She walked out of the barracks, and the gravel crunched under her boots. Each step felt lighter, not because the ground changed, but because she was no longer carrying the weight of being misunderstood. People looked at her differently now, not with fear or confusion, but with respect, the kind that doesn't have to be spoken, the kind that lives in quiet nods and held eye contact. Riley smiled when Elena passed her in the hallway. Carter lifted 2 fingers in a small salute. Even Mason, the one who had once dropped a fake lizard on her bed, now made space for her during drills. Not because he was scared, but because he finally saw her. The medal she received sat inside her locker. She didn't wear it. She didn't flash it. Because the medal wasn't what changed things. The truth did. The truth about her fire. The truth about her pain. The truth that she had already been a warrior long before the uniform. She was given more responsibility now. She led warm-ups, ran obstacle drills, and helped others improve. Some recruits came to her for advice. "How do you stay so calm?" one asked. Elena smiled gently. "I've already been through worse," she answered. And they believed her. Because it was true, even the officers noticed it. "She's not loud," said Sergeant Brooks to the commander. "But when she walks into a room, people listen. She doesn't need to raise her voice. Her story already speaks louder than words." One night during lights out, Riley whispered from the bed across the room, "Elena." "Yeah?" "I want to be like you." Elena turned her head. "No," she said gently. "You should be like you. But stronger." And in that moment, Riley understood. Strength doesn't always mean being the best. Sometimes it just means not giving up. Weeks passed, and training got tougher. But Elena never backed down. And now, when she stumbled, there were hands to help her up. When she fell behind, someone slowed down beside her, not because she asked, but because they had learned from her. There was no more laughter about her scars. In fact, one day, a new recruit whispered, "I think they make her look powerful." And someone replied, "They're not just scars. They're medals life gave her before the military did." One afternoon, General Harrow returned again for a surprise visit. He walked across the field, hands behind his back, and when he saw Elena leading a training group, he smiled, not just with his mouth but with his eyes. He didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. He just stood and watched. Because watching Elena now was like watching a fire that didn't burn. It glowed. After the training session, he walked up to her. "No one's mocking you now," he said quietly. Elena looked at him and nodded. "No, sir." "And that," he added, "is not because of the medal. It's because you kept walking." Even when they laughed, he patted her on the shoulder. "Carry on, Private." And just like before, he walked away without ceremony, just truth and respect. That night, Elena sat outside under the stars. She looked up, her back against the wall, arms resting on her knees. She thought of the fire again, the one that changed her life. But this time she didn't feel the heat. She felt peace. The girl who once hid behind silence was now leading others, not with power, but with presence. Not with shouting, but with stillness. She had walked through flames, through judgment, through pain, and came out stronger, softer, better. She had walked into the Marines hoping to find strength, but instead, she helped others find their own. And now, when people talked about bravery, they didn't think of battles. They thought of Elena Rivera, the recruit who never bragged, the girl with burn scars and steady hands, the soldier who taught them that real courage doesn't shout, it simply shows up, every single day. And from that day forward, she walked different. Not because she was proud, but because she was finally free.